Hello, my name is Spencer. I'm the Director of Engineering for Reaction Commerce. We're a remote first or distributed first company currently operating in the US and in Europe. In the past, I've managed teams in the US, Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Right now, our team is spread from having a pretty solid concentration on the West Coast, mostly in the LA area. We've got several people in Mountain Time, several people in the central US, a few people in the eastern US, and then our furthest east is we have an engineer in Greece, in Athens. So my day, can start as early as I want, and there's people online. It can end as early or as late as I want. There's people online, and I think that's one of the challenges with remote working is your office is in your house. And without some kind of dedicated space, it can be really easy to find yourself at work rather than to find yourself at home.
Yeah. I think with everything going on with the coronavirus, a lot of people are immediately working from home and they've never planned on this before. Another big thing I've noticed is that people that have always worked from home, like freelancers, used to have a rhythm of going out at a certain time. So how would you say that overall everything's been affected as far as your team's concerned?
So for our team, we have a broad spectrum. I'd say we have people for whom quarantine is their life. Not to be glib about it, but they have been living, that they work from home, they, play from home, they don't go out that much. Personally, I've been using Instacart for around a year now, already work from home. So I'll acknowledge that the impact on my day-to-day life has been a lot less substantial than on others. At the same time, I've got a few people on my team who have kids who can't be in childcare, who have significant others, or they themselves who have medical conditions that makes it really hard to go see a doctor right now. And so there's, I think, an enormous amount of challenge on any team, whether it's on you immediately or on people that you know. That makes this whole situation fairly unique and I think significantly more difficult than the traditional work from home. Another thing that I would acknowledge is that regardless of whether you're working from home or working from an office, having a crisis in the world affects the way you can focus. And it doesn't really matter if you're used to working from home or if you're not used to working from home. When there's a lot of chaos or a lot of concern for what's going on in the world, it can be tough to focus no matter how good you are at working from home.
Yeah. A lot of people are concerned that when people work remote, that they're going to just Netflix all day or, play video games. How do you guys address that on your team, making sure people stay engaged and focus on task?
Well, so I think probably the underlying trait here is you've got to be able to trust your team. And if you have people on your team that you're worried about, just not working during work hours, I think that's an issue that you need to address, whether they're in the office or whether they're at home. And that's really not a work from home or a remote work issue. That's a trust issue, that's a reliability issue. And those are types of things that I would address with my team, regardless of whether they were at home or not. I think the other thing is you got to make sure that people have work that's engaging. If people feel like the work that they're doing is just busy work, it doesn't actually impact the company, it doesn't impact, the way that they interact with their peers, or, if they're doing work that just feels like a waste of time, they're probably more likely to be distracted than to be deeply engaged. If people are doing work that they connect with and that feels really relevant, feels like it's important to the company, it's important to their team, I think it's easier to stay engaged. Now, again, I think in a crisis, people have trouble focusing, and I think you have to account for that. And there's no magic bullet, whether it's work from home or work from an office or have people in Zoom meetings all day that can, supplant that urge to, check the news or whatever. And so I think every individual is going to interact with that differently, and some people are going to need more space. Some people are dealing with, loved ones who are impacted by this in ways that maybe you can't understand. And so I think as a manager, as a leader, you have to be willing to treat individuals individually and understand their situations, really try to understand what they're going through, how they're coping, and what kinds of work might be good. I think the last thing that I would say on this topic is I think it can be very difficult to focus on longer term work or work with a longer horizon. Personally, it's hard to focus on anything that's not what's right in front of me right now. Anytime I start thinking about work that's 3 months, 6 months out, the first thing is that it feels like, okay, well, is this going to be relevant in 3 months? Like, what's the world going to look like in 3 months? You know, is this situation going to have changed? Is everything going to be back to normal? Is it going to be worse? All those thoughts really impact the ability to do long-term planning. So for me, I've kind of shifted my focus to more immediate work. What's right in front of me? What can I do to help my team? We do have projects that we're working on, but I would say we've reduced the scope of the work from we're going to set goals that, you know, are a year out to, you know, what can we do this week? What can we do next week?
I think when you're trying to shift and be agile and be able to handle things changing all the time as you do in remote work and really in any work environment, I think tools are probably the most essential part of that. So do you have any programs or tools or, you know, like things that you use that help you to be that changeable, to be that adaptable to circumstances?
Yeah, I think having solid video chat software is pretty essential. Our company uses Zoom. I'm sure there's several other you know, great platforms out there. I don't want to be a Zoom shill here, but we use Zoom. We use Slack, which is a team chat app. We're a software company, so we use tools like GitHub and ZenHub, and that's just been our regular workflow. I mean, not because of this situation, just that's how we work. I think that's how we would work in a co-located environment as well. We default to more public communication. This is something I could give a talk on, but the defaulting to more public communication, DMs are really hard to surface if there's valuable information that comes out later. Somebody has to take that DM, repackage it, and then figure out how to share it with the company. Same thing with private chats. You know, if you have a private chat with 4 people and all of a sudden you realize, oh, you know what, Nicole should have been in on this. It's really painful to like add somebody to that private chat, because if you've got those things going, maybe there's other information that she shouldn't be privy to, or that just doesn't need to be shared. Now you have to package that conversation up. So kind of one of the rules we have on our team is kind of default to the most public channel that's appropriate. So the more public you can make something, the better. I think written communication is better than verbal communication. Video chats are incredible. They're really great for problem solving and working through things, but they don't stay documented. As soon as our chat is over, you know, somebody will have to watch a video or, you know, splunk through a transcript to really find something out. It's not searchable in the normal forms. So we default to written communication. We prefer written communication. We prefer more public channels over private channels. Means a lot of documentation, a lot of, you know, docs that are searchable. We've found that helps quite a bit.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's something that you lose a lot in when you're in the same environment or in the same building, because you just pass by someone in the hall and sort something out and go tell someone, and then you end up with a he said, she said mess. So I think that could be a great thing to implement no matter where you're working or how you're working or anything else like that. What would you say was the biggest challenge to adapting to working remote? That I know a lot of these companies never envisioned that they would be working remote, and now they are. So what would you say was like the biggest challenge and you wish you would have known?
Wow, that's a great question. It's hard for me to go so superlative as to say the very biggest, but I'll give an example and maybe something else that come to mind as well. I think one of the hardest challenges is kind of the casual touch points that you have in an office environment. That might be taking somebody to lunch where you have conversations that are important, but not something you can necessarily sum up in an email. That might be the conversation in the office kitchen, water cooler, whatever the kind of the meeting point for people when they're taking a break is. Some of these conversations are social in nature. You know, you get to know your teammates, you get to know, you know, about their families, you get to know whatever it is that they feel like sharing. And some of them are more work in nature. And I think those types of conversations, it's easy to underestimate how important those are. And you can end up with people who are very siloed, have no idea what else other people are working on without trying to replicate some of those things. I think that's very difficult to do remote. There's no silver bullet. We do have a few tools that we use on our team. One is called Know Your Team, which is like a Slack bot that asks it asks questions. I think it has social questions, it has work questions, it has a few, and like 3 or 4 times a week, it'll send out a message to everyone, compile all their answers, and then share it back. So it might be like, what are you working on this week is one I think that happens at the beginning of every week. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite slushy flavor? Like just stuff that's pretty random. If you could, like, would you rather is like, would you rather be stranded on a desert island with only your favorite food in the world, or would you rather be stranded on a desert island with everything except for your favorite food in the world? Just like stuff like that may seem kind of silly and unimportant to the work environment, but fosters a community and a type of communication that really you would only get in a co-located environment. So I think tools help. I think pairing and kind of regular conversations with your coworkers helps, but you have to work to build those relationships that might otherwise develop more naturally.
Yeah. How important would you say is keeping a hierarchy? I know you said you could try to go to the most public channels, but trying to make sure that if you have a question, you go to your boss and they go to their boss. Do you think hierarchy kind of stays intact or is more fluid in remote work?
That's a great question. I don't know that there's an easy answer here. I think this will probably show some of the colors I have about what I think the more effective organizations are. I wouldn't suggest that you go and change the way, I wouldn't suggest that you change how your organization communicates in the chain of communication. Mm-hmm. If before you were working remotely, somebody had to talk to their boss, who had to talk to their boss, who had to talk to their boss, and then back down the other side. There's probably a little bit of built up. I don't even know how to talk about this, but to me, that's built into your organization now. And if you go and you change that, you're going to cause a lot more kind of you may create a lot of new problems by changing the way that communication happens. If you're already an organization where anybody can ask anybody for anything, I wouldn't change that. Does remote work make that easier? Maybe, especially if you have like an always on chat and you can just reach out to somebody. Mm-hmm. I think from the perspective of the work that I do, working in software, working with multiple teams, we have very, very open communication, probably some of the more open communication of any company I've been a part of. At the same time, just because we have open communication doesn't mean that if I ask Ryan to go do something that he's going to do it. Right. We still have, specific ways that work gets scheduled. We want to make sure that we're working on the most important things for our company at any given time. Mm-hmm. I think, how do you open up those lines of communication with the tools that you now have without changing the way you work, the way work gets prioritized, the way work gets scheduled? I think to me that would be how I'd probably reframe the question. I think communication's great. But again, it probably depends on your organization. Some organizations have, I think, a more strict or more restrictions around who can access what information. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another thing to be aware of. And for our company, anything that we can make public to the company, we make public to the company. Mm-hmm. Anything that we can make public to the world, we make public to the world. We try to push as much information as far out as possible. Yeah. But that's part of our culture and our organization, and I wouldn't say that's true for every company. Mm-hmm. And there's certainly companies that probably should not be considering that type of information sharing.
Sure, HIPAA or banking or weird things like that.
Yeah, places where you have to have a secret clearance or anything like that. It's really important to keep that information classified. So I think it depends on the organization, depends on the culture. Sure. Just use the tools to help you do the work that you already know how to do.
Yeah, I like it. Well, I know you're a very busy man. So with that, we'll wrap up. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's going to be really helpful information for so many different companies that are right now trying to navigate this entirely new to them world of remote work. And I really hope that it opens all of our eyes and the options for companies around the world to develop more information-based work, to develop more trust-based work, and more remote work that can fit people's lives a little bit better, because I think the world has changed and I think it's going to be for the better.
Cool. Well, thank you, Courtney.
Yeah, of course.